Did extraterrestrials create man in their own image? As an undergraduate at Caltech, Marshall KLARFELD was fascinated by the scientific knowledge found in the Bible. Since then, he's been doing extensive research on the Anunnaki. You know, Sitchin talked about the planet Nibiru,
Yes.
the 3,600-year elliptical orbit. But
Yes.
what do you think their craft looked like?
From the translations of the cuneiform tablets, Zechariah did a fantastic job of telling us that they had these rocket ships, and the rocket ships were able to travel to Mars, which was their way station at one time, and back to Nibiru and back and forth. And they came here to get gold to save their planet, and they needed a system of transporting it back and forth. So they built this mothership, which orbited the planet Earth for a long period of time and gave support and equipment and everything that was necessary to carry on the production of the gold and getting it back to Nibiru. So I found evidence in, say, the 11th tablet again of the Epic of Gilgamesh, where they talk about when the flood came, the Anunnaki exited Earth. They lifted off in their rocket ships, and they went up to Anu at this way station, and the way station was the orbiting mothership, and they watched from the mothership what was happening.
Did you see that picture that came out a few weeks ago of that coronal mass ejection?
Yes, and the object
in Mercury, that something was
around Mercury. Yeah, I love that.
What was that?
Well, to me, it was the orbiting mothership that left Earth and found a hiding place in our solar system so they could keep an eye on us and be cloaked. In other words, I think it was not revealed until the ejection from the sun caused it to be revealed in the picture that NASA took.
It's still functional? There's still occupants?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure. This civilization is immortal. It's hard for us to grasp that conception of immortality. But they've been around for a long time. They're going to be around for a long time more, and I think they're maybe going to come back. I used to think that that was not going to happen, but now I've changed my thinking, George. I think, in a weird sense, we need them. We need them to come back and straighten us out. So
well, this picture though, this picture around Mercury of something.
Yes.
Why, if it's their mothership, why would they be around that location?
Well, that's a good question, George. I really can't answer that, but if they wanted to stay in the proximity of where they did their original pioneer work, which is Earth isn't that far from Mercury in a spatial sense. Now, people are talking about, it takes 3,600 years for Nibiru. They don't have to come from Nibiru. They could come back from the mothership, as they were here when they originally operated out of the mothership. And the mothership is huge. It has all of life support systems that they need to feed and sustain themselves. And it has a huge population, and also is, if you look at that picture, it's like half the size of Mercury.
That's right. It's huge.
Amazing.
Yeah. The genetic engineering, how do you think they accomplished it? What did they do?
Well, what was described, George, was a process where they took there was a species here on the planet called the Homo erectus. It's the species just before Homo sapiens. And they took the female egg from the Homo erectus, they scooped out the nucleus, they put their DNA in the nucleus, then they planted that egg into one of their females, who became a birth mother. And they did many experiments before they did this one, and they had a lot of mistakes that they wrote about. They were willing to admit their mistakes. But when they produced this first hybrid, which was kind of a bicameral production of their DNA and Homo erectus, they produced Adam. They talked about it. They called them Adamu.
In their image.
In their image, and what they needed was a primitive worker. They were having kind of a mutiny in their gold mines 2 miles down, and they needed a replacement for it. So that's the story that goes along with the genetic engineering. But today, George, we're doing the same thing for females who aren't fertile.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We take their eggs and we scoop out the nucleus and we put in the male DNA and replant it, and it produces babies. If destiny was for them to create us, and if destiny was for us to inherit this planet, then they kind of have a stake in our survival, right?
That's right.
And if they're to help us survive, they may be coming back to stop us from destroying ourselves with all our atomic weapons, because their history, they wrote about this. It's fascinating to me. They had the same problem on their planet Nibiru, and unfortunately they recreated the same problem, which is atomic warfare, here on planet Earth 4,000 years ago. They got crazy and they started going at each other, and if you read in the Bible the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, the destruction of those cities is remarkably the same as Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Just that we were atomic weapons that destroyed it. And they wrote about it. And then they called it the Great Calamity, because what happened, George, and this is also part of the history of the Anunnaki, is with all their intelligence and all their smarts, they didn't figure out that there was going to be atomic fallout from this stupidity that they did. And sure enough, there was what they called the evil wind. And the evil wind drifted from the Sinai over their prize, Eden, which was the Sumerian civilization, and it totally wiped it out. So here they are, these creator, advanced species, and they destroy their prize.
Well, there is evidence of some kind of nuclear blast in the deserts.
Yeah,
yeah.
Glass.
There's glass deep down there.
Yeah. And why would the Bible talk about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah?
Yeah. And if you turned around and looked at it, you'd turn into a pillar of salt, right?
Exactly, the story of Lot and his wife.
I wonder if they were exiled, Marshall, from their own planet, almost like they were prisoners sent away.
Well, here's what happened. They got a message after they'd been here for so many thousands of years that if they ever tried to go back to Nibiru, they would die. Here are the immortals being threatened with death.
They would die or be killed?
No, they would die. What happened was they had been here so long, they adjusted to our gravitational and to our heat cycle, which had an effect on their physiology, and they weren't equipped to go back. In other words, they were told, there was a messenger from the Creator of all that said, you cannot go back to your home planet because you're going to die.
Did they have a long life cycle here?
Oh, yeah. Oh, tremendous. That's the part that I have a difficulty getting my mind around, immortality, people who live for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years.
So when the Bible writes about, like, Methuselah living hundreds and hundreds of years.
900 years, right.
Could he have been an Anunnaki?
It could have been one of these hybrids, the combos, the giants. When they interfered with our females and they had babies by the females. For instance, if you remember the story of the Trojan War, there was this guy Achilles, who his mother swore his father was Zeus, the god Zeus.
Right.
So that's possible. So he was a giant.
Was Goliath one of these?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Atlas and Hector. I mean, all these giants, even the one that, like you said, David slew Goliath. He was a giant.
How tall do you think they were, Marshall?
My best estimation is between 8.5 and 9 feet.
Jeez.
And that they interfaced and coexisted with humans, and that they had a great influence on our history. That they were very big movers in the things that happened and the things that they left on the planet after they phased off. That the gold belonged to them, the gods. The gold belonged to the gods, and they could use it to make art things with, but they couldn't use it for money or anything else. And that one day they were going to come back and take it because it belonged to them.
Huh.
Now, if you read that history carefully, you understand that when was it Montezuma saw the Spanish conquistadors coming with their ships?
Mm-hmm.
They thought that was the fulfillment of the prophecy that he was going to return and take his gold. Well, they gave him the gold because it belonged to them. And then they got in real trouble. Anyway, that's another story. But the story of the return is part of their history. It's part of their religion. I think when Quetzalcoatl left, he says, I'm coming back. But just don't do anything with the gold. The gold belongs to us. And you will have to wait 300 years when the thing comes back through the inner planets.
Why did they settle in Sumer, Marshall?
Well, they landed in the Persian Gulf. And they came ashore and founded their first town was called Eridu, which it translates from Sumerian as home in the far away.
Mm-hmm.
And from there they created a series of 7 ancient towns in that area between the Tigris and Euphrates Valley, and they were all Anunnaki. There were no humans, George, at that time. This is, long, long time ago.
Okay.
Well, actually, the story of the flood was that the commander, Enlil, knew it was coming, and he gathered them all together, the leaders of the Anunnaki, and he said, look, there's this tsunami's going to happen. When our planet comes in this time, it's going to pull its gravitational thing is going to pull the Antarctic ice shelf into the South Ocean, causing a 1,000-foot tsunami, which is going to wipe every surface living creature off the planet. And the humans are really getting to bother me. They're diluting our bloodline. And by the way, if this is their destiny, they're going to die. Let them die. And the way it played out was that their creator of all, their deity, interfered with Enlil's command to let them all die. And he instructed Enlil's brother, Enki, how to do it.
And to save someone.
There was a time when there was a struggle between the leaders, Enlil and Enki, for control of the humans. And I think one of them, perhaps Enlil, chose a tribe of people that later became the Hebrews.
Okay.
And he might have been the god of the Hebrews.
I don't know if you heard of that movie, Fourth Kind, that came out about a year or so ago.
Great movie about Nome, Alaska, that strange case.
It actually shows, for the first time in almost 4,000 years, the actual Sumerian language being spoken. And I was a bit concerned because, Mr. Marshall, you mentioned that they seem to be benevolent and they want to help us, but during the movie you can see that they're very harsh. They seem to be arrogant. They call themselves gods, and they're distorting the human body, and they're kind of using the human body as like a experiment, and it does seem like they care too much about us,
Well, whether they have guilt and whether they feel any compassion towards us is a good question. I don't have the answer to that, Andrew. I'm sorry.
Remember that Superman movie, Marshall, where they were all, convicts on their planet, and they were sent in that little glass plate off into space? I keep on thinking that the Anunnaki might have been prisoners that the folks on the Bureau just didn't want to have anymore. So, rather than have prison colonies, they just shipped them away to other planets. I would guess they've got some kind of anti-gravity propulsion system, too.
Well, that's possible, too. However, they did talk about Mars, that Mars was a way station in the beginning, and Mars had water and an atmosphere, and that the last time that Nibiru came through it sucked all the air and the water off of Mars, and what we're looking at today is what was left, and they lost that as a way station. That might have been one of the motivations to building the super mothership. They did some magnificent things, and they knew that we would evolve into a space-age species because we have their DNA. In other words, we inherited, everybody on this planet shares the same DNA. And we're going to become space-age like them, and they assumed that they left us a few monuments, but that we would figure all these other things out, and we are. We are figuring everything out.
Marshall, I wanted to ask you if you agree with Sitchin that he was afraid of the Anunnaki. He had fear for them. And when I read Genesis Revisited, and they talked about the DNA and how we were, jump-started, it sunk in, that's why we're born with original sin, because we're contaminated from birth with the Anunnaki DNA.
Good point.
And, also, the Anunnaki did not want us to reach their level of sophistication and knowledge by shortening our lifespan, by splitting up our languages when we tried to create a shim in the Tower of Babel.
Much like what the Bible says.
Right. So, the Anunnaki aren't our friends, really, even though they're our creators. We would have been wiped out during the Great Flood if it would have been up to the consensus of the Anunnaki themselves. Only Enki and his sister
saved us.
Yeah, they're the ones who inseminated men behind their backs.
What do you think, Marshall? Marshall? Where is Marshall? Marshall may have disappeared on us. Right at the, they came and got him. They took him away. The Where is Marshall? Marshall may have disappeared on us. Right at the, they came and got him. They took him away. The Anunnaki took Marshall away.